This is the first part of the slideshow series on cinematography, and we're going to be looking at a variety of different examples from one particular film, which is often regarded as one of the top three or so films ever made, Citizen Kane, directed by Orson Welles. And while Orson Welles is famous as the director of Citizen Kane, much of its greatness and renown has to do with the photography, the cinematography, and how it is shot and the way that it looks. And of course, this is a case where you have someone else, not just Orson Welles, making those decisions. On Citizen Kane, the director of photography, or DP, which is another term for cinematographer, was Greg Toland, and he did a number of movies which are really great, and I highly recommend you check out Citizen Kane. So, the director of photography is another of the individuals that works on a film who has a lot of responsibility. In particular, they are really responsible for the look of the film in terms of how it's shot, how shots are set up, and how they're lit. And that's why they're called the director of photography, as opposed to the director of the actors or whatever those other things that the directors do. Now, what do? They compose the shot. That means they decide where the figures are lined up and how they're going to fill up the frame. They light it and then they shoot it. They're not usually actually the cameraman, but they're the person directing all those different activities. So for us, in this slideshow and the couple others that are going to follow up, we're going to be thinking about this. This is one of the first things that people often are drawn to when they think about films and how films are different, is what they look like, how they're shot, how the camera is positioned, and so forth. So we're going to just come up with some basic vocabulary. Some of it's going to seem maybe rudimentary or common sense, but it's important that we have these things, that we have these basic terms that we then can use to describe what we're seeing in films. So here we go. Again, these are all screen grabs, we would call them these days, from Citizen Kane. So if you think about the things that we see in a film, I'm going to go ahead and put these terms all out here so that I can talk about them. First of all, we have the shot. So when we watch a film, we can think of a shot as being a unit of the film, right? It is what gets put in the film from the process of production through post-production. And we have a series of shots all together that are going to compose the film, right? Now that shot itself is chosen from any number of takes, right? And you've all probably seen at some point, someone with a slate, that thing that you click to do lots of different shots over and over and over again, okay? Now those multiple takes come from what's called a setup. A setup is where you put the camera and you light up the scene and you do all your different takes. Okay, so if we put these things in terms, in order, if we're to think about, if you're going out and making a movie and you've got a scene with lots of things going on in it, right? You are going to shoot that scene from multiple setups. That means you're going to put the camera in one place and you're going to do multiple takes. You're going to run through the scene multiple times until you think you're happy with what you've got. And then during editing, you're going to go back through those takes. You're going to find the particular shot that you want, right? So we do setups in order to get the shots that we want. Frame refers to the boundaries of what we're actually going to see in the film. The frame is what we see, what we point the camera out. So whenever you see film, whenever you see movie or TV, it's never just passively reflecting the world as it exists, whether it's written in a script or it's a documentary that's recorded in reality. It's always at least framing what we see. There's things that are inside the frame and things that are outside of the frame. So all these things work together and are related. And you need to know the difference between these terms: the shot, the take, the setup, and then the frame. Now, the frame itself differs in size, and sometimes if you go to the movies, you'll notice that they move the curtains around because of the different shapes of the screen. And this is most obvious with television sets too, in terms of sometimes you'll see programs that fill up the whole screen and sometimes they don't. This all goes back to the history of film and actually the competition between film and television. Aspect ratio refers to the ratio of the width of the image to the height of the image, right? So in film, it is always wider than it is taller. right? So we have what's called Academy ratio, and this was the traditional film ratio of 1.33 wide to 1 high. What happens is when television becomes popular in the 1950s, the film industry starts making things wider. They do things to try to encourage people to go see movies instead of just watching TV. And so then the screens started getting wider. And the most common widescreen ratio is the 1.85 to 1. That's what most movies are in. And not coincidentally, that's now what high definition TV is. So if you have a television that was made in the last 10 years, chances are you've already got a widescreen 1.85 television. Letterbox is a term that is used not as much as it once was, but because of this difference between TV and film up until recently, whenever a movie was on TV, you had two choices. Either you cut off the sides or you letterboxed it, which meant that you put bars over it to make it so it wasn't so much wider than it was tall, so that would fit on your TV. Moving on now. We're talking about the shot size. And when we talk about types of shots, really the types of shots, it refers to how far away the camera lens is to the subject that is being shot. So again, these are all images from Citizen Kane. This is a long shot, and it helps, I think, when you're trying to keep in mind the difference between these things, to think about them in terms of the human body and how much of the human body we can see, right? So a long shot, we can see the full human body. It's a long shot, otherwise known as a wide shot. It would look something like that. Versus, of course, you probably know this, the close-up, which means just part of the body is going to fill the frame. And of course, you can see that the difference between these kinds of shots is very useful to draw our attentions to different things, right? To show us, to bring us so that we're looking at something more closely that we otherwise wouldn't see if it was just in the wide frame. It might be there, but there's a lot greater chance that we wouldn't focus on it because it would just be such a smaller part of the longer, wider scene that we are seeing. This is an example of the medium shot, which essentially means we can see people from the waist up. There is, in particular, what is called the two shot, which means a medium shot with two people in the frame. And this is really the most common shot that you see in films of any kind because it works so well to have people who are in conversation together. So you will see lots of two shots, lots of medium shots. And also, this is very prevalent in television as well. Okay, so the medium shot, the waist up, and the two shot is a medium shot where you actually have two people in the frame. These terms and these abbreviations that I'm showing are often used in screenplays, either when the screenwriter makes them or when the director goes through and develops a shooting script that is going to essentially be the instructions to follow during the shooting of the film, during its production. All right, in between these things that we've talked about so far is the medium long shot, which basically means that you can see someone from the knees up. And this is sometimes called the American shot because it was so common in the films of what's known as the classical Hollywood cinema, the 1930s and the 1940s. So, these are all useful in terms of drawing our attention to particular things or allowing us to see movement or allowing us to go back and forth between different things that are within the frame itself. So guess what? We'll expand here what we have just a little bit. What do you think this one is? It is an extreme long shot. Allows us to see all kinds of things, but no real detail. And then this, the extreme close-up. And in this moment in the film, he's about to say something really mysterious that the rest of the film is going to try to unravel. Rosebud. So that's it for this first video about shot size and cinematography.